Please join me in giving our mayoral candidates a warm Pachyderm Club welcome. Now we'll start with Jeff.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here with, I know so many Shocker fans that are making a sacrifice. I know one in the back of the room is making a huge sacrifice today, so we appreciate that. Maybe someone can give us some live updates as we go. I will share a little bit of my background. I have a great-great-grandfather that founded one of the very first Baptist churches near San Antonio, Texas. I was raised in an Assembly of God church, and then in the early 90s, I converted to Catholicism. Our family ran an automotive business, and I think at the age of 13, I rebuilt my first engine. We like to work on cars. We race cars. My mother, who joined us today, used to tell people all the time she didn't know if I was going to grow up to be a race car driver or a preacher. Who would have ever known that reckless preaching would have led to this? But certainly I appreciate the opportunity to help us move our city forward. I mentioned my mother, one thing that we can all agree upon. We all inherently, I believe, care about our children and that next generation of children, and we want their opportunities to be more than what we've had. I know that my kids are the same way. I have said this a number of times. When your kids are doing well, it really doesn't matter what happens to you in life. Life is good in itself if your kids are doing well and they're successful. My wife, who I've been married to for 34 years, we've raised 3 children. We have a daughter that will be 33 at the end of March. She has worked for the last 8 years in a special ed classroom. She is now a certified special ed para, and we're excited about what she's built for her and her family. She's married and she has 1 child who is, I will tell you, not from a biased family, but the absolute brightest granddaughter on the planet. But that is coming from me. We have twin boys that are identical. One of our twins is an aerospace engineer, and he works for NIAR here in town, the National Institute for Aviation Research, and loves his job. And his twin brother is a geologist that gets his master's from Emporia State in May, and we're pretty excited. I said, you know, son, I think you're going to get an opportunity to make a lot of money right now in the oil industry. And he said, Dad, I've decided that I want to teach. And I said, just understand, son, I spent 12 years on the May School Board. I love the teaching profession, but they're not going to make as much as a geologist with a master's degree. And he goes, Dad, don't worry. My wife's a medical doctor, and we're doing okay financially. So I couldn't be more proud of my children. I have said this before, the reason that I enjoy doing this, the reason that I spent 12 years on the May School Board, the reason that I've spent the last 8 years on the Wichita City Council to make Wichita a better place is to give opportunities for all of our children, for all of that next generation, to have more opportunities than what we have had. And I think that's inherent in all of us, and I hope you agree with me. And I appreciate you taking up part of your first half of the Shocker game to be with us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam Williams, and I'm running for mayor of Wichita, Kansas. And my wife is in the audience with us here today, Marilyn, and she's an artist. So she's the one in the family who keeps me rooted in those things that are really important. And I love her and I appreciate her so much. 4 of our children, our 6 children, have settled here in Wichita. They made it their home. One of them is a physician, one of them is a physician's assistant, one of them is an administrator in a hospital, and one of them is married to an ophthalmologist. So as I get older, I'm well taken care of. At least I won't feel any pain. And so I'm really grateful for they're here. The important thing about those 4 children, though, that are here in Wichita is all 9 of their children are here. Marilyn and I have been blessed with 9 grandchildren, and they live here in Wichita. And today I think you all have already heard what was announced, that our unemployment rate here in Wichita is again 1 point higher than the state as a whole, and we're higher than the nation, and we've got some real serious issues in this town for us to deal with to be able to move into the future and provide the opportunity for our children. My opportunities in life have been great and varied. I came from a family who lived in a mobile home for the first 11 years of my life. My dad was a surveyor. He was the person that did the monuments and put them in the ground so that you could come along and do the topographical surveying so that you could make the maps that y'all use when you go hiking and so forth. Dad was the one that hiked the peaks and put those monuments in place. When I was 11, he said that we need some stability in our life. We'd move 4 or 5 times a year, and he said we're going to move to Alaska. And so I grew up in Anchorage. Ended up going and being a missionary in Germany. I met my wife there. She was from Salt Lake. Went back to Salt Lake, finished my education in Salt Lake. We lived there 17 years, and in 1989 we moved to Wichita. Hauled all 6 of our kids across the prairie, and it was the best thing we ever did. I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I have had to be here in Wichita, Kansas, and to learn who you are. My professional background has been in question. I did pass the CPA exam in Utah. I did have my license in Utah, and when I moved to Kansas, I didn't transfer the license. Total oversight on my part. And I apologize for any time if I appeared to be wanting to do any of your taxes or attest to your financial statements, because I promise you I had no interest in doing that. But I will say I see absolutely no problem with having an ex-CPA as the mayor of Wichita, Kansas. The discipline that I have been taught and practiced and learned in my life is exactly what we need in this city right now to bring accountability and to be able to do the things in this city that we need to provide the infrastructure that we need to have in this city so that we can become a world-class destination for businesses to grow, businesses to stay, and most importantly, for our children and our grandchildren to stay here and make a future just as we made a future. It's my opportunity to present myself to you as a person who is qualified to do that. Having said that, I've never been in public office before. So as I make boneheaded mistakes as I go through this, I ask for your indulgence. I'm an honest guy, and as we talk today, I think you're going to get an understanding of how I feel on many of the issues that are pertinent to this city today. The only answer you're going to get from me is that which I know to give, and that's the honest answer. And I ask for your support, and I ask for your understanding, and most importantly, I ask for you to ask me questions if I don't come across and explain and have you understand what I say. Thank you all so very much for being here.
My question is for both candidates. I believe, and I'm sure everybody else here believes, in transparency within government. So my direct question to both the candidates, I'd like to know exactly where you stood regarding the recent sales tax vote, whether you supported the sales tax increase or whether you did not.
My opponent has on several occasions said that he voted against the sales tax, and it's recently come to my attention that he is telling members of the community that I voted for the sales tax. That is wrong. I did not support the sales tax, and I did not vote for the sales tax. But it raises the bigger question of why did we even need to have a sales tax to provide for infrastructure for the basic things tax dollars should have been providing in the first place, water and streets. In my opinion, had we had the proper leadership from our council in the last 6 years, we would not have had that issue at all. It is my promise to you that I will bring the professional problem solving, the professional planning, and the professional leadership that is needed to this city to provide us the opportunity to be ahead of these challenges and not to react to those challenges. I think it's great that my opponent voted against it. But I think there's a better solution by providing the leadership the past 8 years that would have allowed us to not be in this position at all. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad my opponent straightened that out, because I have heard from other individuals that he has shared with them a little bit different story, and maybe that eventually will work its way out too. When he questions the leadership over the last 4 years, I'm not sure if it's just my leadership or if it's Pete Meissner's leadership or if it's Carl Brewer's leadership or if it's Levanta Williams' leadership, but I can tell you this. I did not support the sales tax initiative vocally at the bench, and I didn't support the sales tax initiative when I went to the ballot box. I thought that the plan was ill-conceived. I think that it had too many issues in it, and what the biggest issue was the $80 million jobs fund that the chamber wanted to have so that they could control how they thought jobs should have been grown, and they want to continue to throw cash at companies. And I think we've got to get away from that. I think we need to take a different approach to throwing cash at companies. So I never hid the fact that I voted against it. I think there are some important things that we need to address. I think we can address those issues. We're going to have time. We're not going to run out of water tomorrow. One of the issues that we do need to address quickly is transit, and I hope we get an opportunity to do that.
Thank you. This is for both of you. What specific things would each of you anticipate doing to bring jobs to Wichita and grow the economy in a way that would benefit all of Wichita citizens at all economic classes?
There are three components to that, and then I'll add another fourth that's kind of on the periphery. The WSU Innovation Campus can act as an incubator program, and I think it allows us to be very optimistic about a different approach to growing jobs in this community. If you combine the Innovation Incubator Campus with what is known as the Blueprint for Regional Economic Growth, it's coined as the BREG plan. It's working its way through the final stages right now, and it identifies 6 clusters in this area that we should be focusing on that already naturally exist, that and they're energy and oil, agriculture, advanced metals. If we prop up those 6 clusters and provide our resources that we have around those clusters, and those industries start doing what we know that they will do, if you want to be a supplier to one of those clusters, we don't have to throw cash at you to come here. You're going to want to be a supplier. You're going to move here and be a part of the energy that's growing with those 6 clusters once we focus on those. Totally different approach to growing jobs in this market. Totally different approach to diversifying jobs in this market. What we need to add to that is quality of life opportunities so these companies can recruit employees to come to Wichita.
We need to make Wichita the magnet for small business growth. There are over 20,000 small businesses in our region, and if we make this city the place for regulation to be the most smallest it can be, for taxation and fee to be the lowest it can be, so that small businesses will grow, we then will be able to create the jobs we need to. Small business is where 90% of job growth comes from. We have to create the environment where small business grows. Now, along with it, it's time for Wichita to finally diversify. I believe that Dr. Bardot and his Innovation Center concept is going to reignite entrepreneurship in Wichita, Kansas. We have the greatest history, some of the greatest history in this country right here in Wichita, and that wealth still exists in our community. I believe with the proper ability to work with people, we can re-engage that wealth in creating jobs through entrepreneurship in this community. And lastly, we have to take care of our legacy companies. We have to understand that our aviation businesses are going to continue to evolve. We're never going to have the same amount of employees working. So how do we nurture them and keep them here and then diversify and leverage the technology that they have into understanding? And that is where the cluster analysis that Jeff talked about will be very helpful, because we are world class in materials, for example. Thank you.
So there is a law in Wichita, section 204.050, that says council members shall refrain from making decisions involving business associates, customers, clients, friends, and competitors. But it's the official position of the City of Wichita that that law does not need to be followed. And a related law that many people would like would be a pay-to-play law that prevents City Council members or the mayor from voting to enrich their significant campaign contributors. Would you tell us how you feel about, should this city code be enforced, and what about adopting pay-to-play laws?
Thank you, Bob. Very easy for me. I think that we absolutely need a ethics code in Wichita, or to your point, live the one we have. I think it's very important that our lives, when it comes to working on your business, be public. And even it intrudes into our private life, as I've discovered. And it's important for us to be visible and to be understood in how our money is raised and how we're used it, and how it's used. I think it's very important that everybody understand not only how I behave myself, but also as how the council as a whole behaves. I think all the processes of the council should be absolutely transparent. I think all the processes of the city should absolutely be transparent. Now, on the PATA, I have a little bit of a question when it comes to, if I get $500 from a donor, does that mean that I automatically cannot be interested in something that they have going on in the county business? I have to be the one who judges that. And if it is a clear and present conflict, or if it even appears to me to be a conflict, why would I not recuse myself from that? That seems to me to be the honorable and the right thing to do. And that's what I would do as your mayor.
Well, it would certainly be easier if all of us took Lonnie Wright's approach and then didn't have any friends. Lonnie told me just earlier that he doesn't like people. But my problem is I really do like people, and I have lots of friends, and so I certainly understand when we should recuse ourselves or abstain from a vote. I've always said transparency is good. You can look at all of my donors. You know exactly who has given to our campaign. You know exactly where we've spent our money. And I've never wanted to hide that. If we want to take that up a level, I certainly would encourage that kind of dialogue, because I'm not sure how any of us could take a vote on any. I mean, you look at the contribution list from both candidates. There are a lot of names on there from a lot of business people that are involved in a lot of projects that are growing jobs in this community. And if that's the case, then we would have to set ourselves aside on every one of those aviation companies, because all of them have given. You look down the list of the donors. Every aviation company in this town has given money to one candidate or the other. And so I don't know that that's a good plan if you think that the leader of this community has to sit on the sidelines because of that. I'm all for transparency. If we can ratchet up that dialogue, I'm for that too.
Information to candidates, if I could have your views on regionalism and working with the other communities in South Central Kansas through REAP.
Well, I've said this before. I am an open book. I have served this community for 8 years. I have chaired several different committees for the Regional Economic Area Partners. I believe in regionalism. I believe in the Bragg study that is totally focused on regionalism. And we have the mayor of Bel Air sitting with us today. I'll tell you this in public. If Bel Air has an opportunity to encourage a business to land in Bel Air, I don't want to compete with Bel Air if that company can land in Bel Air. Why should we go back and forth and up the ante for each other? Because if they land in Bel Air, they're going to be good for Wichita. I'll use this example. Siemens recently built a plant in Hutchinson, Kansas. Some people think, Hutchinson, that's way out of our region. Since Siemens built their plant in Hutchinson, Kansas, there's been at least 15 suppliers that have moved into this region. I was in a meeting yesterday where the representative from Hutchinson said, you know, we kind of thought that when we built in Hutch that all of the suppliers would end up kind of coming to Hutch. It didn't happen. All of the suppliers ended up going to other neighboring communities. We all benefit when any of us is successful.
Well, it's easy, I guess, to talk about what would be. I know that the reality is that Wichita is not a very good partner in a lot of ways, and I think that needs to improve. I think it's critical that we look at the regional win as being a win for everybody. You know, I visited 9 different cities in the past 9 years, and I believe very strongly that you can learn best practices from communities that you go to. And then you do it in the Wichita way. In every one of those communities I visited, a common thing came to the front, and that is that a crisis in their community caused them to reinvent themselves. Well, the loss of 30,000 jobs is our crisis, and it's time for us to reinvent ourselves. And each one of those communities looked beyond the borders of that city. They looked at the region, and they said, what happens in our region, then everybody wins. And I believe that our city government has to not only talk the talk, but they need to walk the walk and be a good partner and be someone who can work. And it's easy to say a win for one is a win for all, but it's not so easy to live that. And I believe it's very, very critical that as we reinvent ourselves, that we reinvent ourselves as South Central Kansas, with Wichita being the heart. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming. On Wednesday of next week, the House Elections Committee, upon which I serve, is taking up Senate Bill 171, which proposes to move spring elections to the fall. 2 years ago, we had about a 6% turnout. The last spring election, we had about a 6% turnout. Fall elections traditionally get a 51% turnout. And I think you both would like to have seen a better turnout in the recent primary, which, as I recall, was about 10%. My question for you is, do you support moving spring elections to the fall?
Representative Whitmer, I actually have been on record of saying I don't believe that that is the solution, and here's why. Number one, I strongly believe that local elections should stay nonpartisan. I haven't found a Republican way to fill a pothole yet. I certainly believe that moving them to the fall, depending on how that aligns, I'm open to that dialogue. I would not want to put them in the fall with all of the other elections because I think they just simply get lost. When you have congressional candidates and governors and a multitude of races that are spending tens of millions of dollars in ads and airtime and all of the other campaigning that gets focused on those big races, I don't know how we even attempt to get our message out. I think it totally gets lost in that totally flood of campaigning. You've heard many people say even recently that this last fall election there was a lot of election fatigue. I can't imagine how we fit all of that together. But I'd certainly, if we can separate it, maybe I'm open to that dialogue, but I still think that they need to be by themselves.
Being new to this opportunity of being involved in politics, I was so sad last Tuesday when so few people voted. I took it personally. I took it like, well, Sam, you know, are you really doing the thing you should be doing? Because you couldn't ignite, you know, together, we as candidates couldn't ignite more than 10% of our fellow citizens to get involved in the process. I took that as a personal issue. Whatever we can do to change that, we need to do it. In my mind, the mayor of Wichita is every bit as important as the governor of Kansas. We are the largest city in the state of Kansas. We need to claim our birthright, and what better way to claim our birthright than to absolutely positively move the stature of our elections to the point where we get involved, we have the ability to understand and put it in a perspective of this is a big deal. So I believe that we need to change the system so that more citizens get involved. I'm not afraid of telling people I'm a Republican or a Democrat or whatever. People know that anyway. I'm not, and I can govern with people knowing that I'm a Republican. I can go into Democratic neighborhoods in this city and I can have an intelligent conversation and I can win the people's support with the message I bring, whether it's in the fall or whether it's in the spring. Thank you.
The recent attempt to receive additional funding through taxation here in Wichita was to cover some of the expenses that you in the city government couldn't afford to cover under our current system. My question to you is, why not do what I feel you should do to raise additional funding for the necessities of the citizens of Wichita, and that is to amend and totally change the retirement system, the city government, which is spending hundreds of millions of dollars more over the years than the average run-of-the-mill John Doe working person here that you want to tax.
I'm going to answer that question a little broadly and then very specifically. Using my questionable qualifications as an accountant, I believe that I can understand completely and totally the financial situation of the city in a very short period of time. In fact, I think I already have a pretty good understanding of that. And a fundamental change that America has gone through is retirement plans have changed. They've gone from defined benefit to defined contribution. It has happened in every aspect of the business. It needs to happen in government, it needs to be accelerated, and it needs to happen immediately. And in my opinion, that is one of the first things we need to take a look at. But also, it has to be done in a way so I don't go to jail. And there are laws and there are statutes that you have to follow to make sure that promises that we made to certain people who came into that plan, they are upheld. But in my mind, that doesn't keep you from having the conversation about how to restructure and do what we have been doing in private business for the last 25 years.
Here's the nice news that I'll share with you. Our retirement system in the city of Wichita is nearly fully funded. It may be in the best shape of any retirement system in the entire 5 or 6 state area. We have looked at a number of different ways to make government more efficient. We have privatized some of our services. We have eliminated some positions that we felt can be better done by more collaboration. We have trimmed our budget. And we keep over $25 million in emergency reserves in this city, and we have balanced our budget every single year in the last 8 years that I've been on city council. The way that we're going to improve this city isn't by working around the fringes. We need growth, and growth will cover a lot of issues. We have altered, I say we, the city of Wichita has altered their retirement benefits package over the last 25 years, I believe 3 different times. So will there eventually be another 4th revision? Certainly we ought to have that dialogue. We get that. It's been altered 3 different times, so it's been done before. But the bottom line is we have the right foundation to grow our city the right way.
Gentlemen, what's your position on the future of Century 2 and the current downtown library, and why?
I personally have said this before. I don't know why there's such a rush to tear down buildings that are 50 years old. In some cases, a 50-year-old building in some countries would be the new kid on the block. I think that there's an opportunity to look at Century 2 yet to see how it can be modified. I would not want to tear down the old library at all. I think we can repurpose that. I have been supportive of the new Learning Center because it's a collaborative effort with Wichita State, some other partners like Cox Communications. There is an opportunity to raise more than $5 million in private funds. There's also an opportunity with a grant that's in right now with a private organization, the Knight Foundation, that's looking to award us a grant of $8 million. So nearly half of that new learning center, with all of the collaborative things that goes into it, could be paid with private dollars. We will know that before we go forward with spending any taxpayers' dollars.
I agree that there are buildings that are created that need to have lifespans more than 40 years. I would suggest, though, that in a world that is as different as we are today with technology and how we deliver performing arts and how we do other things, we should always be looking at what is going to be the best magnet for our community to grow and to move forward. Would I say right now we need to tear down Century 2? Absolutely not. What I say is we plan what this community looks like as we move forward, and we have a discussion together about how it's going to look, and we do that in a transparent and a honoring everyone's opinion way, and we were to decide that we were to need to have a change, that I would participate in that effort. The library is a challenge for me because we just had a sales tax issue where we tried to raise $500 million for streets, sewers, job creation, and water. And less than a month after that, all of a sudden, we had $30 million to build a library. I need to understand exactly what is going on there, and I am in the process of understanding that. Right now, I would come down very much in the, I would suggest very heavily that it should be mostly private and very little public dollars as we move forward in that. We already put substantial dollars into the library system as a city. And how we move forward needs to be totally understood and engaged in by the community.
I've got the water question today, since we just got mentioned that. The city spent, according to media reports, about $250 million on the Aquifer Recharge Project. With the water challenge before us today, is the Aquifer Recharge Project the solution for our water problem? And if it's not, in your opinion, what is your solution going forward, and how do we get there?
Carl, thank you for the question. I was not in favor of the sales tax issue for water because I think that we were approaching it from the wrong way. The city says, well, we had 4 or 5, I can't remember how many studies, and this was the way that was established we should do it. But I don't think it's just a Wichita issue. I think it's a county, it's a state, it's a regional issue. And back to the regional questions we had before, my approach to it would be to regionally come up with a long-term plan for water. We do not have a supply problem today. We have a long-term plan problem. And we need to make sure we ensure that the supply continues. Now, we do have another problem, and that is we have a public water works that has had some better days. We're on the way to improving it, but is our cost of water what is it allowing for conservation? Is it allowing for us to do the things we need to do to run a public works in the right way? I don't know the answer to that question yet, Carl, but I'm going to find out and make sure that we are running a public utility in a way that it allows for the proper funding and the proper, and for us to allow for the proper practices to be able to have a good water plan, for example, conservation. So all of those things have to be done, from my opinion.
Carl, your question was addressing the 50-year water supply?
It's your question.
It's your question, but
It's a bigger question.
okay.
Water for the future.
All right. I appreciate you letting me ask my question, but I'm happy to answer yours. We'll start with the ASR program that's currently in place. That started under Mayor Knight's leadership. And I've said this before, I certainly have a son that's a geologist and one that's an aerospace engineer. I can fully understand this. ASR and its concept, Aquifer Storage Recharge, was a pretty bright plan that was drawn up by a lot of really smart engineers doing work on a whiteboard saying if we do this, we'll have a 50-year water supply. It didn't quite work out that way. The ASR has had a number of issues. We've had to replace every single pump. We've had to replace the multitude of lines in that system. The system didn't have enough water to help it run on a more efficient basis. We now have been operating that ASR system for about 3 years, fully operating what has been built under Mayor Knight's leadership. We now know what it's going to take to fix it. It's no longer really smart engineers working on a whiteboard. We have practical experience. We can fix it. I still believe in the ASR plan. The bigger question is how do we make it more equitable so it's not on the backs of the ratepayers of Wichita, because we only use about 50% of the water out of that system, so it needs to be more equitable.
We had a meeting with the South Central Kansas delegation this past week with Secretary Mike King. And for the past 30, 35 years, we've been talking about the Northwest Circumferential, building that. And Mike King basically said, well, we have about 40% of the land, but there is no commitment from the city. We don't have any way. I asked him, would this ever be built before my grandchildren's die? And basically he says, I cannot answer that. I got a second question, and if I may, the other thing is both of you have talked about transparency, and I was surprised to find out when I was the vice chair of local government that the city of Wichita does not come under the ethics program in the state. And we have never, there is no reporting, there is no transparency. So I would like to hear also those answers.
Well, let me address that infrastructure question first. I think there's still people wondering if Kellogg's are going to be built before the sun burns out. But saying that, we have finally received a really nice award from the state of Kansas to help us on some major Kellogg infrastructure. And so I appreciate those representatives that have enabled some of those dollars to come to the city of Wichita. Unfortunately, before that time, the majority of Kellogg has been built on the backs of Wichitans under that local sales tax that's countywide that we get 50% of, that we have 73% of the population, but that's another argument for another day. We need partners if we're going to do those major infrastructure projects like the K96. Wichita has participated. We've put several $1 million into buying right-of-way. Those are public records. I know that our finance department would be glad to share that. So we have been participating in buying some of that right-of-way, Mario, but that's going to be a big project that we need partners on. And we're not going to be able to put that on the backs of our citizens to build a highway that's going to be that much money. We have on I don't know if you're talking about campaign finance or if you're talking about taking a meal. All right, maybe I can address that with you later, Mario.
Mario, I'm a West Sider. I'd love to see that happen. But I'll be honest, priorities have to be set in the city for how we use our funds. And I don't believe a CIP is a way to hide earmarks. I believe a CIP is there to help a city become the city it needs to be to attract jobs and to make it the place where where our kids will stay and work. And as the Northwest bypass fits into that, then yes, I'm 100% for it. But I'm going to have to study it and understand how it flows and how it works into the overall plan for the city. As to transparency, I have no idea why we don't have an ethics code in Wichita, Kansas. It makes no sense to me. As I said in an answer to an earlier question, I would be 100% and in fact will most likely propose such a action as I go through my campaign. We need it and we will have it. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here today. My question has to do with railroad tracks and overpasses. On Sunday, I waited over half an hour at 29th Street and Broadway for 4 trains. They didn't lift the gates between each. And I think there should be a bridge over every railroad track wherever there's a major road. How big of a priority would that be for you if you were mayor?
Thank you for the question. I've spent a lot of time with Bob Knight and trying to get an understanding of how he got the elevated railway through our city. And people told him that he couldn't do that he couldn't make that happen. And one of the ways I'm going to govern is I'm going to reach out to people who have done it and who have been there and have the merit badge and have the t-shirt that they've run the marathon or that they've done the job to help me understand how to make those things happen. I don't have an answer right now as to how, but I do know as we prioritize the things in our city that we have to do to make it a better place to live, that is one of those things that has to be dealt with.
My opponent doesn't have to look far. I'm happy to help guide him on some of those issues because I chaired the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization for 2 years, and that organization is charged with taking dollars and recreating partnerships with state and federal folks so that we can get money locally to build big projects, whether it's elevated rail corridor, whether it's helping with interchanges through the town that Kellogg runs through. We have to find partnerships, again, that should not rest solely on the backs of taxpayers in this city. Elevated rail corridors are going to be extremely more beneficial, certainly as we look at running out of non-attainment with our air quality here in the next few years. That's going to create a number of different issues in the way that we operate. I'm for that, but I want to make sure we have the right partners in place to help pay for that.
A couple years ago, I did I studied up on water problem. And Cedar County has 13 times our current water usage. We are a water-rich county without, doing anything crazy like ASR. I do not support ASR, but going back to what you guys both said to do, we need to do it in a fair and a regional way. 1/10 of 1 cent per gallon increase in the water rates would fund the ASR project as proposed, and then Mulvane or Derby or whomever uses our water would be helping pay for that. Would you support 1/10 of 1 cent?
Again, I don't think Bob Knight was too far off track when he initiated ASR. My frustration is, again, the Equus beds are a great place to store water. When you look at what we have happening at Cheney Lake during the summer months, Cheney Lake loses more to evaporation on a hot summer day than we pump for all of our Wichita water use on a hot summer day. Cheney Lake loses more to evaporation. You can go look that up. That's kind of a staggering number. Storing water in the Equus beds underground is a great way to do that. You don't lose any to evaporation. But there are a lot of partners that get their water from the Equus beds. And to put it just solely on the backs of Wichitans and even the other folks that we serve water to is not fair, because there's too many people that then would get that use the water that don't pay a penny. And I'm not going to penalize our citizens. I'm going to fight for our citizens so that we have a more equitable way to pay for that 50-year water supply.
Craig, if I understand the question, it was 1/10% sales tax to, is that correct?
No, 1/10 per gallon.
Per gallon tax. Here's what I, yeah, cent, I'm with you. Here's what I think, folks, and that is, I want to know more about how the public utility of water is run and how it's how this process is going. I'm not sure that, I don't know that everything is being done within that utility and the way it should be done to properly receive income for the water that it's selling, to properly set aside for capital improvements, and all of the things that are necessary for running a public utility in the right way. So before I would support any kind of a raise in revenue for anything, to support anything, I want to make sure that utility is being run in the right way. And then we get into the process of making business decisions on how to do the changes that need to be if we don't have enough revenue. But as I mentioned earlier, supply is not the problem in Wichita. We have plenty of water. We need the long-term plan, and we need to get away from having a concern that water pipes are breaking, that the infrastructure is broken. How do we make sure, I know we have studies, but how do we make sure that it's properly funded, and then decide how to do it?
Also on the spring ballot, there's an initiative for a limited decriminalization of marijuana. This will allow our police department to prioritize on crimes with victims. What's your stand?
My stand on that is a state of Kansas issue. It's not a Wichita, Kansas issue. Had I been on the council, I would, at the time the petitioners came to suggest doing a petition, I would have said to those people, hey, the law says you can do the petition. You may do that, but I can tell you right now, as mayor, I'm not going to move that forward as a ballot issue because it needs to be done at the state issue. Do I personally think that we need to treat people we're mad at differently than we do people that are really bad? Yes, I do. Having said that, how do I do that as a mayor? I do it by talking with the people at the state level and having a relationship there where they can truly make the change. As mayor, I would not have supported putting that on the ballot.
Again, I'm an open book. I did support putting that on the ballot. And here's the beauty of our democracy. We have a well laid out democracy that totally defines what people can do as a citizen so that their voice can be heard. The folks that wanted to push that issue to a referendum followed the laws. They followed the democratic process. They went out and collected enough signatures of registered voters in the city of Wichita. And I'm not about to play king and say, we are not going to allow you to be a part of democracy. Their voice should be heard. It is a state issue, and I think ultimately it will come down to being a state issue. But if someone wants to follow the process that's well defined, and then we just simply say, I don't like that issue, we're not going to allow your voice to be heard, I think is criminal. I'm not here to be a monarch or a king. I'm here to promote democracy.
Next question back here. Back to water for a moment. Right now, Wichita reserves a 1% drought policy, which means we look to 10 years of having a water supply plan. In most of the rest of the state and a lot of part of the country use a 2%, which only allows for 5 years. Would you be in favor of moving it to a 5 year so the drought requirements are not so stringent?
I certainly think that that's part of the dialogue we need to continue to have as we look for that long-term solution that's more equitable for our 50-year water supply. I've said this before, and I know that there were some folks that accused the city, and I think that there's some confusion over, are we out of water? We are not out of water, folks. And certainly we could run into a situation tomorrow where the skies dry up and we go into a 10-year drought. I suppose that can happen. I have been told, and again, I have to rely on some experts. We're a large city that has almost 3,000 employees, and we have some very bright, dedicated folks, from attorneys to engineers to accountants, that we have to be able to trust and then have dialogue with them when we talk about forming issues. I do think that we have some bright people that have shared with us that we have a 50-year water supply if two things don't happen. If we don't have a drought that lasts more than 6 or 7 years, and if we don't have anything more than 0.5% in growth, we have a 50-year water supply. I don't want to set on 0.5% growth. I want us to grow faster than that, and I don't want to gamble that we're never going to have a 6-year drought. But we do have time right now to find that long-term solution.
Having spent some time with this, Dan, I think I right now would go to the 2%. I think it would allow us to plan adequately for the things we need to do in the future.
We now move into the candidate closing statement phase. 2 minutes. Let's start with Sam Williams, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate the opportunity I've had to be here with you today. You have the opportunity to look forward or to continue doing the things the way we've been doing them in the past. I suggest that we have a choice to make here. And I would invite you to understand that this city we live in has some real challenges right now. And it's not just maybe we can fix them if we just keep things going the way they are, or maybe it'll go away. We have lost in the last 8 years 30,000 jobs. And just think in your mind about what that means. I was yesterday with someone who shared with me that they were out at their school and they met with, they were talking to someone working behind the counter at the lunch counter. And she said she's working behind the counter because her husband was an engineer and he lost his job and he was now driving a bus. And she was working behind the counter so that they could make things work. Ladies and gentlemen, Wichita has some issues. We have to deal with them. We have to create the jobs. And we can't keep doing it the way we've been doing it. We need new leadership. We need leadership that is not afraid to make bold decisions, that doesn't owe anybody to anything, that has the ability to think through in an intelligent and a logical and a business way. And I'm tired of hearing that government is not a business. Ladies and gentlemen, business principles go across anything and everything. It's, you know, it's not something that is mutually exclusive. You apply business experience across the board. I have that experience. And I'm doing it for those 9 grandkids that I told you about earlier. Thank you very much.
Looking at my watch, I think it's halftime, so you may be able to catch the second half of our Shocker game, and hopefully someone can give us a report quickly on where they're at the first 28-20. We appreciate the opportunity to share our story today. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here. I ran a small company that grew from 5 employees to 75 employees over about a 25-year span. It was a great opportunity. I still have breakfast once a week with the gentleman that owned that company that eventually sold it to a firm in Texas. I do have real business experience at growing jobs. I understand that. I have been in one government position or another, 12 years on the May School Board and 8 years on the City Council. And we have gone through one of the toughest recessionary periods that we could have possibly gone through starting in about '08, and there has been a job spiral. I get that. At that same time, we were totally focused on right-sizing government, balancing our budget every year, making sure we have reserves, making sure that we do have a long-range plan to fix our infrastructure issues. My opponent likes to share that he is going to be new leadership. At the same time of that $30,000 job spiral, he was right in the middle of running the Chamber of Commerce, chairing the Chamber of Commerce. Maybe he was waiting on government to grow jobs. I think private industry needs to grow jobs, and I think I have a better plan to do that, to change the way that we grow jobs in this community. And I would love to have your support to get that done. Thank you.